What is up, everyone? So today, as you can see, I have the Yong Heng HPA compressor. It's a 4500 PSI compressor. We're going to go over its features, its function, the things I recommend you swapping out right away from the get-go, the price point it comes in at, and whether or not it's a good purchase for you. So let's get into this review and see what it's all about. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when you purchase this compressor is, of course, make sure it works. All right, at the price point it comes in at, you're going to spend in the US about $350, $400-ish, sometimes, depending on who you buy it from. If you buy it on AliExpress and directly from the manufacturer, you're going to spend, this one here in particular, I paid $180, and it's their highest version, so their best model you could get. Typically this one, a lot of people don't want the cutoff and the alarm and stuff like that. It comes with a few other accessories, but hey, for $20 more, I got the whole thing. Depending on the seller you buy it from will depend on whether or not you know the price point you're going to pay for it. A few sellers on there for the same exact compressor want it $250 to $280, and in that instance I would have bought the cheaper one because I'm going to regulate this every time I use it, just because it's a HPA compressor. You don't want it just to depend on itself. I mean, high compressed air is very dangerous, especially if it explodes. Before we get into the review, I want to mention when lubricating O-rings, such on your HPA tanks and stuff, make sure you use the proper lubrication that is required for your application, because some of the oils and stuff, I believe a lot of people are using silicone to lubricate their O-rings, but some oils will actually ignite in the combustion state. So do your due diligence, do your research, and make sure whatever you're using for lubrication is okay with HPA, high pressure air compressors and tanks. So to keep this thing properly lubricated, what you need to do is remember that in here, your piston, you have a rod, and then that rod has a shaft that goes through it that allows it to pump just like a car would, but there's no bearings involved from the exploded views that I've seen. So the oil that they recommend to use on this thing is actually listed in your instructions or your owner's manual. It recommends VG46 or AW46 oil, and you don't want to run motor oil because it could collect moisture and water. This fluid here for compressors is actually hydraulic fluid, and as you all know, hydraulic fluid is going to be compressed you know, in order for it to operate whatever it is it's lifting or moving or what have you, just like a forklift uses. So a lot of people say scrap the 46 and go with the Royal Purple 100. Amazon sells this. You could buy it at your auto store and stuff. So they recommend this because it's going to quiet this down a little bit, and it's also going to allow you to run for an extended period of time without you know, harming your engine or your compressor pump. All right, another thing I want to mention is keeping it cool. A lot of people recommend this Royal Purple Ice. It's 25 degrees. It says that it'll keep it cooler by 25 degrees. It's not going to keep it 25 degrees cooler. I mean, that's like on all perfect conditions probably, but it'll probably keep it maybe about 5 degrees cooler, but it's better than nothing, right? All right, so running through the manual real quick. Basically, they got a 220 volt at 50 hertz and a 110 volt at 60 hertz. It tells you the oil that you want to run, 46, VG46, AW46, but we already talked about this. It tells you the decibels, which is 78 decibels. It gives you a whole breakdown of the motor and how it should work. Okay, and then another important thing is the water. So it tells you the best temperature for your water. Make sure you keep that in mind. Keep a heat gun on you so you could check the operating temperatures on this stuff while you're pumping it up. especially if you're pumping up stuff for an extensive amount of time. 50 to 70 degrees Celsius for the water, and then the operating temperature for this should be no more than 75, because it means that the water is not extracting any of the heat, and it's just overheating your pump. So you want to turn it off, let it cool down, and then run it again. All right, you got to break down to that area, like all these blocks, and then it tells you troubleshooting, what if something goes wrong, what to look for. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on the manual. It's going to come with your compressor. I just wanted to point those things out so you're not worried about it. Once you receive the compressor and your oil, because it's not going to ship with oil, you're going to have to fill it up, right? So you're going to have a cap that's capped off up here. You're going to take this out. Keep this just in case you need to store it or whatever, and you don't want this breaking off. You're going to fill this up here until the oil is halfway. Then you're going to put this breather back on. Okay, this is going to come in your little bag. It's going to be right there, and then it's going to be halfway full. Okay, all your instructions are here, so it should be halfway. Mine's about a little over halfway. It should be purple because it's royal purple. Okay, and then once you get it to that point, if you ever need to change your oil, all you do is take this off. That's the drain plug. It'll leak it all out. Some people do recommend to run this with the oil in there for an hour or so with no pressure in it, or tighten your knobs here. Just allow the whip to bleed out some of the water or the air, and that way it creates some pressure, but at least it runs it through the cycle. So that way you could run this through its pace and then drain the oil out, so whatever contaminants are in there get flushed out, and then you're ready to rock and roll. That's personal preference. I mean, I don't run this thing hard, so what the tanks I'm going to fill up are for paintball stuff, so it's not too big of an issue. I'm not filling in those big scuba tanks, so the minimal use that I'm going to use this, it should be fine just using it as is right away. So buying 1 quart of this should be able to do 2 oil changes, and then you're gonna basically, once you do all that, fill that up, you're gonna put these screws in. So this one and this one, so those come in the kit. All right, these are your bleed valves, and then you're gonna so they're to release the air, and then you're going to put on your whip. It's going to have this little cigarette filter, which you're going to have to change out. It comes apart. Okay, so you change those out. It catches any oil and stuff. And then what I recommend you using is Loctite. So you could use Loctite on here, but you're going to have to let it sit for 24 hours for it to cure, or you could use Teflon tape. Like I said, make sure you tighten up everything and make sure nothing's loose before you use this. So I want to talk a little bit about this stuff. When utilizing this, what I did was I put it in a 3-gallon bucket and use that. Remember that you want to make sure everything's closed once you're done with this stuff, especially the water, so that way none of it evaporates. This should keep it from evaporating, but I mean, who knows? I haven't used it enough to inform you on that. Also, this is made to be broken down. So over time, the longer you use this stuff is going to finally deplete, and you're going to have to buy more of this. This stuff will not last forever. So keep that in mind, and keep that in mind when watching your temperatures. If your temperatures seem to go up really high, maybe it's time that you need to replace this. Also, when dealing with water, I do not recommend throwing ice in there. A lot of people recommend doing that. Yes, it keeps your thing cool, but it's going to deplete or dilute this stuff here because you're adding more water to the system. What I recommend you doing is getting ice packs, freezing those, or getting milk jugs or whatever, freezing those full of water, and then setting them inside your bucket with this. So that way you know you're not diluting your main water flow. All right, that brings me into my next upgrade, which would be the pump. All right, let's talk about the pump that it comes with. As you can see, there's a huge difference. All right, So if you do decide to use this, that's fine. It works. I've ran it with this to start on this. And basically this is a tiny pump. Make sure this is not closed. If it's straight up and down, it's closed. It's not going to allow water to go through. You're going to need this thing wide open to get the max flow of water, right? This one is 120 volts at 60 hertz because that's the compressor I bought for the US, since I live in the US. It's 8 watts, so that's how much power consumption, and it's 600 liters per hour. So that's what this is pumping at, all right? The one I end up buying is 3,000 liters per hour. I mean, you could tell it's a big difference, right? Same thing, if it's like that, it's going to be closed, all right? You want to make sure that it's wide open all the time. So the reason why I decided to purchase a larger pump is because instead of running ice, I decided to run more volume of water through my compressor, so that way it could extract heat a lot faster and not allow it to get hot, all right? So I'm using that method instead of having to always use ice or something cool to insert into my bucket of water to keep the compressor running cool. So more water flow will keep your stuff a lot cooler because it's going to extract heat a lot faster. Of course, you get all this stuff, your O-rings, your cigarette filters, and then your thermometer, all right? We'll talk about that in a little bit. But also this came with this little connector, all right? So this plugs into there. The reason why I couldn't use this yet is because the fittings that I have are too big for this. So I'm gonna actually have to stretch this in order to get this to connect in order for me to run this, or I'm just gonna run larger tubing and neck it down up here. Technically, it could go into any one of these fittings when you plug it in. So you're gonna have an intake and an output for that water to flow out back into your bucket. I recommend doing it at the top, so that way it allows gravity to, you know, kind of filter in everything and get it to flow out instead of trying to push it upstream. Just a recommendation. I don't know how much that's gonna help you. Okay, so the pump expense when buying this thing, you're looking about, I think it was like $12 or something like that. So not a huge expense, especially when you're invested into a compressor like this, all right? Now for the thermometer, or the temperature, or thermometer, whatever you want to call it. This thing goes on there, and basically you run the wire to here so it picks up on the heat, right? I'm not going to run this one, so I'm not going to hook it up. You just plug it in and set it next to something that's hot, so that way it can regulate your temperature a lot better. But I think I'm going to upgrade it. As you can see, it's a little probe there, and then once you turn it on, it's on and it's running. I'm going to probably maybe get one that's wired directly into the system, so that way I know that if this goes out, as long as this is powered up, it's always going to be running. This thing runs on batteries. I don't want to deal with that. It's Celsius. I don't know if you could change that, but in the States I like to run Fahrenheit because that's what I know. Also, I'm going to run a timer on this, so maybe a vibration sensor timer, or maybe a timer that runs to the power cable, so that way it's a trip meter and it doesn't run out of batteries. That might be the better option, so that way it calculates how many hours this thing has on it, so you could regulate when you need to change the oil and stuff. Okay, so keep that in mind. Trip meter directly wired in along with the temperature sensor may be a good thing, so that way you don't lose any of your data when you're running it, and you know it's going to function every time you plug it in. All right, so when running this, of course you got a filter here. This filter's okay. It separates some moisture out of it and some oil it catches, but it's not great. When I was running this, I could feel moisture coming out. So what I ended up doing was buying one of these. These could be a little bit pricey. This is a tuxing, basically oil and water and any moisture separator. All right, there's a few of these that are going out. They're kind of pricey, but they're all machined nice. One of the things you want to make sure you get when you're buying one of these is you see how far these threads are coming out. This is a big deal here. Some of them have a short set of threads, and that's not good because this is going to be pumped up, you know, with high pressure. So the more thread engagement, the better off you are. And also like the machining on this is pretty good. This O-ring kind of sketchy because it is loose. I wish they came up with maybe a bigger one or something. And then in this tube here, or you got to take out the other end because this is what it's attached to. So as you can see, that's what it looks like from the inside. It's just a straight tube, nothing special. Both sides are the same. So it doesn't really matter which way this goes. But you're greeted with these inserts. Basically what you have is at the beginning, you have your cigarette filter, you have your desiccant. I think these are called molecular sieves. And then you have your charcoal filter. It comes with the extra set of replacements for this stuff. And of course you have your cigarette filter I think that's about 2 inches to space out these things. All right. And then of course you have these holes that allow the air to go through. So some people will run a few of these in line with each other, and be cautious of that because the more of this filtration that your air has to go through, that means the less flow it's going to have, and it's going to build pressure back up into your compressor, forcing it to work harder than it should. Okay. I think one of these should be enough or sufficient. As long as you keep replacing these components and keeping it clean, you should be okay, depending on your use. Also, there's some that are just full charcoal. They're full of these little molecular beads, and then there's some that are just full of desiccant. I like the 3 combo only because it allows it to pull away moisture, any oils, and any odors or whatever that could be bad for, you know, compressed air. It's just a peace of mind. I'm not quite sure what these two do. I think this one will take out more of the water because the desiccant takes out moisture, but I think this will soak up maybe water faster. Someone with more knowledge could enlighten me on that. It's just something that you should research as well. If I find out exactly what they do and it's different from what I say, I'll definitely inform you on that. But I mean, buy the 3 and be done with it, bottom line. When putting this back together, make sure your O-rings line up. All right, you probably want to put lubricant on these, so that way, some silicone or whatever, silicone grease, so that way it doesn't pinch when you're putting it all back together. And then also make sure you tighten everything. All right, so basically what this does is once it's all together, it runs in line with your compressor. So when you hook this up, you're going to plug basically something like this, right? And then you're going to have another one of these fittings that go out with the whip. It's the same exact thing here. It comes with it, so everything comes together. So you don't have to go out and purchase that. I just haven't put it together yet because I don't know where I'm going to mount this. Because as you can see, I don't want it just hanging out here. Okay, so let's talk about how the pressure timer works and stuff, and then how you're going to fill up your tank. So first of all, you're going to set it to the correct pressure you want it at. Mind you, there's a needle that's attached to this red knob. Okay, there's a needle here that's attached to your regulator, and then there's an offset pin. So if you're twisting it and hitting that pin, where your needle is not where it's gonna let the air out. Only on the backstroke of this will it align with that needle. So keep that in mind. You're gonna need to pay attention to this needle down here, not this one here. Before operating this, make sure everything's kosher, including the pressure regulator that you set it at, and then your knobs, make sure they're loose. All right, so when this thing reaches pressure of what you set it at, if you forget it, I never recommend forgetting it, but if you did, this light will blink and an alarm will go off and it'll kill your compressor. Okay, what you need to do is bleed it here, so loosen these on both sides and it'll release the pressure in the line and here in your head. All right, what you should do though is when this is connected to your paintball tank or your HPA tank, on the male end, it's a one-way check valve to your air cylinder, so no air is going to come out of your cylinder. So you leave this hooked up, never disconnect this when it's pressurized. You leach the air out of here and out of here on this side, and then you turn off your compressor, and then you go and release your coupler here. Okay, so the way you hook this up is you plug this in to your HPA tank. Okay, once that's all connected, you make sure these are unscrewed out, not all the way, just barely. Okay, you make sure this is set to the proper your proper PSI that you need, that's needed. Then what you do is you turn on your compressor, you close these up. Okay, once you close them, it's going to build up pressure into your tank. When you hit that pressure that you're needed at, this is either going to fault out and kill it, or you release the pressure here on this one and then the one on this side. Then you go and you turn it off. Once you turn it off, now you're able to release this coupler. Remember, because the air is leaking out of these two, there's no air going to release out of your tank because it's a one-way check valve on the male end that gets put into this. Okay, so you should be good there on your HPA tank. So that's going to complete today's video. If you have any questions about this, leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. It's always greatly appreciated. If you want to see content like this and other content I'll be posting in the near future of projects that I'm going to be using this with, definitely consider subscribing. Until next time, I'll see y'all in the next one.